Hey guys, as you probably heard when I was pulling this thing in, I'm ticking. I also have an overheating problem, but I went ahead and got new tires and they do not fit properly. So today I'll go ahead and show you how we actually cut out the entire WJ and make these tires fit. Alright, what I was able to find were some 35-inch tires, steel wheels, 15-inch rim, and they have about 3 3/4 pack spacing on the rear. They do fit with our 1-ton steering kit on the WJ. And man, is it splitting hairs, but it fits, and that is super good. I haven't had any issues other than my previous tires that were running that were not balanced whatsoever. Today we're going to go through and actually see how we're going to mark this up and get this trimmed out. And then after we trim it, we're going to go ahead and flex everything and make sure we don't need to cut any further, because if we do, you need to do it now so that when you're on the trail, you're beating the crap out of your rig, you're not going to go rip a fender off. So the front, as you can see, is fairly simple. It is just the one sheet. Majority of the time you'll just come through and cut straight, and then you're going to taper it off to wherever your rocker lands. The worst case scenario is you will end up either hitting your windshield juice or the fog light on the bottom, which in that case you'll cut it and cap it and whatever else you would prefer for your rig. Kind of up to you. Now the rear is so much more intricate. This 99% of the time is always going to be your limiting factor, where you're going to pie cut and then bend it all the way to the back wall, hitting it, tacking it, and massaging as much as you can, and then you'll come through and cut the rest of this. Now the hardest thing is that the way that this material works out is it comes from two separate different planes, has a massive gap in the back, and then just tees in within like a 1/2-inch strip. So later in the video, I'll go ahead and walk you through on how I cut out everything in the rear and show you how intricate this actual inside section is, whether it's going to be cut one solid piece and bend it up, or we're going to come in and just make a bunch of pie cuts, bending each one individually. But first, we're going to tackle the front. Whenever you go do body work, whether it's your rig or your daily or whatever, like you can do it by drawing right on the fender itself, use a Sharpie, use a pencil. You can score it if you want and just cut right into the paint. As you can tell with this pristine rig, I usually just draw on the fender itself. I was doing something else and marked out my center. You can score it. Heck, I can scratch it with my fingernail and it still works out. I'm going to go ahead and actually tape off this entire area and then draw on top of my tape line and then go from there, see what it looks like before I cut everything, and then dig right in. So whenever you tape your fender, usually it's because you're trying to save the paint that you're going to be keeping. In this case, yeah, if I'm using a jigsaw, then that backer, if I'm dragging across the fender face itself, it's just going to be vibrating, scratching, putting dings, dents, and everything. It's more of a protective layer whenever you do this kind of stuff. In my case, I really don't mind too much, and there's a lot of different tools for a lot of different jobs. Jigsaw will end up putting a lot of vibration into this fender, and when you start doing that, it's going to move around way too much. I'm going to go ahead and just use a cutoff wheel and then a flap disc to really even everything out when I'm all said and done. So I'm going to go ahead and start with 2 inches, just because in the future I may even go to 37s if need be. At the same time, I'm on stock axles, so my gears can't handle those right now. But regardless, whatever you guys do prefer on cutting out is up to you and your lift height, what you decided to run for your tires and wheels. Anything can work for your own preference in your own rig. You do not have to copy what I'm doing at all. So on this back corner, I'm going to be trying my best to kind of taper this back to my rocker, especially because whenever you purchase these, you're going all the way to the firewall here, and that is going to be as big of a tire you really want to put on your WJ, period. Anything further than that, you're reshaping that entire firewall back corner, and that's just a lot to dig into unless you're doing extreme rock crawling. Using this tape as a straight line itself, I went ahead and actually marked out from my straight section, since I know these two marks anyways are identical on both my sides, since I did a little bit of trimming when I got the tires. I'm marking out from this position 2.5 inches, and then this was already at 2 inches. Adding that as my tangent line here, I'm creating that as my big taper. I'll kind of freehand the bottom of this bumper because I know in the future I'm already going to be getting rid of this, but for the time being, just to get out on the trails, we're going to get her done. All right, before I go ahead and dig my cutoff wheel into the side of my fender, I'm just making sure nothing's going to be in the way and get cut that I don't want cut. For instance, wiring harnesses. In this case, I'm not going really far with a reciprocating saw at all, so I don't have to worry about a blade coming through and hitting my washer fluid. From there, once I do cut through, I'm definitely going to be wanting to retrim this bracket later and either bend this seam flat as much as possible or go ahead and kind of trim this out, whichever, or we'll deal with that in just a moment. Alrighty, now we just have that awesome little flat section. We got to go ahead and cut that out, and then I'll also follow this tape line down after I get that trimmed off. Now, I'm no body guy, but cutting freehand, it's an art. So I'm going to go back through and I'm going to clean up my entire edge, get rid of these sharp pieces, so if I am in my wheel well, I'm not going to be cut. I'm not going to be bleeding at the end of the day. I'm going to go ahead and throw on this flap disc and just clean up the entire edge. And then when I'm all said and done and I like where we trim it, I'm just going to go ahead and paint just the very tip of this thing. So looking at it straight on, you can go ahead and see this entire back section will be a problem if you are running massively big tires, especially by the time this is fully flexed. You're talking your side of your tires either sitting just inside or directly in front and in line of where you cut your fender, depending on your offset again. But steering wise, this is going to be an issue for me, so I got to come back and trim this and then fold this back flange off, so then I don't have anything cutting in my tires. A washer bottle, there's a couple different things you can do. Either get rid of it completely, or you can purchase a ZJ washer bottle and relocate it inside your engine bay. I just happen to have got that with me. Alrighty. Now with my juice out of the way, we can finish this up. So shaping it from the backside, I'm kind of following this stock silhouette, since the majority of the time it's just this front corner that will be the issue. Following that, that's the maximum I can cut. Yeah, followed that right up. All right, now that we got everything trimmed out, I went ahead and cleaned most of the burrs. Still a couple there, but that's all right. It'll buff. You can see from this profile, so much more room. Still not sure about this fog light yet, but then once we get up on the RTI ramp, we're gonna find out what it really looks like when it's at full flex and steering. That's the biggest thing. But for the time being, we're gonna jump to the rear now, and then we can figure out what we need to get done. All right, so first off, we got to get rid of that piece of plastic trim. This is not going back on. I'm going to go ahead and pie cut this entire section right by the bottom of the door, because really this is the limiting section. If I was going to a 37 or I stretch my rear axle, then instead of a straight cut like I will be doing, a lot of people will end up creating a nice jag line and then bringing it up even higher depending on their tire size. Please. That'll work.
You don't need that anymore either.
Nope. looking at the way this whole thing is set up, again, we're going to start with our pie cuts, and then I'm going to keep this nice and straight. And I'm also going to end up pieing this entire section here up to my line that I wanted to keep. And I'm going to bend that in as far as possible. The smaller the pie cut, the easier it will be to bend it up, and you'll get more of a consistent arch. But if you're going to keep it nice and flat, you can do bigger pie cuts. So I'm going to continue the door fender line like I stated previously. That actually measures to about 1.5 inches, 1 3/8 inches. However, by the time this is double folded, triple folded even, because this is already 2 layers now, it's going to be sitting about probably 1.25 inches. So I'm going to mark 1.25 inches out on everything else, following all the way through. And then again, I'm going to drag this back corner out as far as I can. Oh my goodness.
Connect the dots.
Heck yeah. First things first is I'm going to take off this little lip here so that I can take the flap wheel and grind off that paint right before I do smack everything flush. So after that seam was cut out, that ply is starting to actually peel apart. So it's going to be really hard to actually hit that all the way through. I'm going to grab a pair of pliers and actually start to bend these, and then I'll start hitting it with the hammer to help it fully seat. Yeah. So after hitting this with a hammer, I expected a lot more spring back. It actually stayed very flat. I would be comfortable just putting seam sealer on top of this, painting it, calling it a day. However, I did see a couple of these pieces are separating. So as just a safety of mind, cover my own butt later in the future, I'm going to tack this all together so it is back to one piece, and tack it to the body, and then I'll seam sealer and paint over everything.
Do you have to have a welder?
You don't have to have a welder to get this done, and that's what is really nice about this. Is a lot of people are just going to be doing this in their garage, right on the floor. I'll still go back through with the vice grip, because then I can set the tension, make sure it's nice and tight. But these really help with actually bending them completely over. Here's one more.
Paint chip?
Yeah, you ever eat them as a kid? Now, not a body expert or anything, but I'm going to try to treat my sledgehammer as one of those backer plates and actually re-hit a lot of this outward using this as my main base. I'm just going to try to hold that weight up there and then just hit towards it. Alright, back in the shop now. As you can see, it's a little wet outside due to the weather, so we're going to try to flex it inside. Went ahead and pulled out all the springs. I finished cutting on both sides, front and rear. And honestly, I like this look a little bit too much.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go ahead and look at the steering at this full bump right now, and then see what I'm really hitting.
Yeah, it's hitting the pinch weld.
Yep. So that pinch weld is definitely gonna have to go. And then if I turn the other way, it's more than likely also gonna hit that fog light. So, still a little bit more trimming to do, but it's also a good thing to go ahead, flex it, ensure what else you do need cut, and then move on. This is too much fun.
Was it 35s and like 2 inches of lift?
Yeah, 35 and 2 inches. So the most accurate way to do it is obviously you want to flex it as much as you can. Take out your springs. Your limiting factor will be your shocks themselves. As you can see in my case, I'm still going to be rubbing a little bit on my shock body. I do have wheel spacers. I'm probably going to throw them on because I don't want to rub off the paint. I don't want any other particulars that might happen on the trail or off the trail. So it'll just be an ease of mind. After you have it flexed out, which on a flex ramp, on a big rock you can do it in your driveway, throw some jack stands up, take your wheel off on your low side so you can get as much flex as possible. it's doable. It'll take a little bit longer than it is if you do have a post or a 2-lift post or not. But looking at the actual fitment, I'm looking as good as I can be with how all this turned out.
Yeah, lots of room.
We're looking at well over 2 inches. It gets a little bit tight on my bumper, so I can cut that back a little bit further if I want. I'm going to see what it looks like once I have the wheel spacers on, just to see how much further it comes out. And then from there, we'll have to bump up the front and see what it looks like. All right, with the wheel spacers back on, it fixed my issue. I won't have any more rubbing on my shock body. It's not hitting the top section of my spring anymore. This is how I'm going to run it. Looking at it too, I still have plenty of clearance from up above and in front still. Very happy with that fitment. I'm just going to trim a little bit more out of my rear bumper here. So I happen to have a 1-inch block laying around, so I'm just going to use that as a spacer around the side of my tire. I'm going to just hold that and then just trace the whole thing. I'll pretty it up a little bit more and then just kind of freehand it, make sure I have plenty of clearance for days. And then we'll move on to the front. So I'm just picking up this passenger side on my front. You have to make sure you do stuff both passenger and driver side separately. It's mainly because of your track bar and the way that your axle will end up moving. It's going to be the closest it will get to on the trail. And that's the biggest thing that we're really checking here when you're looking for clearances. So now that it's all flexed, you can kind of start to see all the different points that will be that limiting option. Went ahead and bottomed out the shock. This will be the limiting factor for sure. I am hitting the top perch where my spring goes. I don't have any bump stops. So for those of you who actually have that set up, you might hit that before you would actually bottom out completely. If you guys don't want to cut this much, you can just run longer bump stops. You know, right where I don't have any bump stops, it'll help reduce the amount that you actually cut for this entire process. Looking at the remaining in this back corner, I still need to take off this bottom chip and then start to dent and body work this entire section here.
Hit it with your purse.
And then I should be fine up top for my clearance. Starting to turn this, it's really tight on my bumper, and then if I force it through to know what else it'll hit, it's going to hit my fog light. So those definitely have to go. All right, now that we have the driver's side all stuffed up, as you can see, the track bar moved the whole axle over, and the clearances are going to be a little bit different. For me, I'm actually going to be hitting this front corner a lot more when I am steering all the way, and I'm still making contact with the side of my actual shock body. So again, I'm going to go ahead and run some wheel spacers and then recheck this one more time and line out where I need to cut. I'm gonna have to cut a whole lot more of my bumper, get rid of the fog light again, and then after I trim off what I need, go ahead and recheck it, and you just go back and forth until you're happy with how your Jeep fits. All right, looking at this, it's all flexed out, have the wheel spacers on too, so I'm just turning the wheel back and forth. I'm gonna have to hammer in pretty much all of this, mainly here on this bottom corner, but just to be safe later on. I'm going to also try to hammer in this corner so all of that won't be clearanced out and I'll have no big deal there. My top section's still looking good, but it's this front corner is killing me at the moment. So I'm going to go all the way to the actual body line itself and just kind of match that tangentially to where I previously cut. And then as you can see, I'm going to hit this corner. I need to cut that out, follow it through a little bit further interior wise, and that still leaves a lot on my bumper that needs to come off. All right, now that everything is marked out, I know where I'm going to cut to make sure my situation clears. Again, this is all just a lot of cutting because of how much backspacing I'm running with these tires and how much travel that we get out of our lift kit. These Trail Tamers 2.0 have a travel of 14 inches, which is so much more than any other company I know of actually has with their lift kits. So I'm going to get this cut and then drop it on, and you'll see the finished product here at the end. I mean, it sounds like shit, but at least I got big tires. Can I go more? I think I can go more.
Well, the rear tire's starting to spin.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm gonna give her a little umph. That feels a little sketchy. I can't wait to get this thing in the mud. What's my score?
I'd say maybe 85.
85. Well, not too bad of a score. Everything's trimmed, cut. I'm clearing just fine. No bump stops at the moment, so this is extreme. If you don't do bump stops, you won't cut nearly as much as mine. But time to get this thing down the trails. Thanks for watching.